And I'm joined by Dan Patlansky. How you doing, buddy?
I'm excellent, Lee. How about you?
Yeah, all good, man. It's good to have you on the show, bud. Good to have
It's
you on.
great to be on the show, and thanks for your time, brother.
No, my pleasure's all mine, mate. Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for yours. Um, Obviously, a few weeks from now, before as we speak, you released your brand new album, Moving On. For
Yeah.
great record. For me, on this record, it really does sound like, for want of a better term, it's more of a stripped back, more of a live feel about it. Was that something you were aiming for with this?
It was exactly what I wanted to do on this record. I wanted to make you know, it's a record I've wanted to make for ten years now at least, right? Is a record that is a direct representation of what we do live.
Nice.
And I think the reason being is in the past, you do these records with these giant, massive productions with layered tracks and all that stuff, and they sound great, but then when you get on stage and perform them live, they sound nothing like that when you perform them live, and you almost kind of feel like a little bit of a phony. Well, at least I did, doing it. So my whole thing is I wanted a raw, real album that was as close to a live performance as humanly possible.
Oh, nice one, man. I mean, when you were doing that, did you change how you wrote like the songwriting process between this and say, between this and between the last album,
I don't think the songwriting process changed. I mean, it did in a sense that I wrote with other people. I wrote with my bandmates on this one who are just incredible songwriters in their own right. But that wasn't really the reason I chose to write with them. I wrote with them because they're great songwriters. But I think the biggest change was in like the way the album was recorded and how it was produced, right?
nice.
Instead of taking a song and layering 10 bazillion parts, guitar parts on top of each other to make it larger than life, and doing the same with all the instruments, which happens in a lot of recordings and happened in a lot of my previous recordings. I wanted to get the song strong enough that we didn't need to necessarily do all that studio smoke and mirrors, behind the scenes to make it kind of work. I wanted it to be like, well, if we perform it exactly like we perform it live, it's got to come across and still, do the job. So I think that was really the thought process when writing. We didn't want to write parts that weren't, I suppose, me, and something that I wouldn't normally do, or I would only be able to do in a studio or with other musicians. So yeah, I think the biggest part was the production and how we arranged the album.
Oh, nice one. How did you find that process and what writing with that mindset of I want this to have a more of a live feel? Did you find it easier or more tricky as opposed to, like you say, with the smoke and mirrors side of things of, putting on bigger productions on things and working with layers?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. I think in hindsight, it was a lot easier because in the past would write songs that I wouldn't necessarily be convinced of, right?
Gotcha.
Because when you were playing them without any production, just on an acoustic guitar, singing it, you'd be like, not really feeling the song or,
Yeah.
or seeing the direction of the song. But then a producer would often go, but when we add on X,
This
Y,
and
and
that.
Z to the thing, it's going to be this amazing thing, which didn't really sit that well with me. So for me, when we were writing this album, we knew we kind of hit the mark when it sounded great when we were just sitting on acoustic guitars and voices, and we were like, man, that's really cool. That's working for us. That means that when we pop on the electric guitar, bass and drums and the harmonies and all that sort of stuff like we do live, it's gonna work because it works in its most simple kind of form, right? So in that sense, it was very, very easy to pick songs for the album. It really was because you knew immediately. Like if it sounded dodgy, while you're doing it, you're like, why is it sounding dodgy? It's because there's parts that need to be changed that aren't suiting, or whatever the case is, and would either scrap the song completely, or we would change parts until it didn't sound dodgy, and we were like, yeah, it's sounding great now. So in that sense, it was the most natural process I've ever had on an album, from the songwriting to recording the album.
No, nice one, man. I've seen on previous releases you stated that you use certain guitars, certain amps, certain effects pedals to get the sound that you wanted. Did you stick to a strict setup throughout the whole album, or did you use different setups depending on the songs that you're recording on this one?
No, I mean it was because we're going for the live sound. I
Mm,
used my live rig, my like carbon copy of the live rig. Occasionally, I'd add maybe one pedal in for a, a particular tone and sound and vibe on a chorus or whatever the case was. But it was literally exactly the same as my live rig. But we spent a lot of time on the miking of the amp, to get it to sound,
yeah,
to get as close to that tone and that sound I wanted in my head, which was effectively hearing the room, not just hearing the speaker, like where the
yeah.
mic is like right down the throat of the speaker and that's all you hear. And that's a very unnatural way for me to hear a guitar. And, I love hearing a room. I love hearing the walls of the room you're recording in. So we ended up with like a four mic kind of a setup.
Oh wow.
And when we mixed the album, we didn't even EQ the guitars. We didn't need to because
Oh no.
all we had to do, depending on the song, was blend in either more distant mics, medium kind of distant mics, or very close, because we obviously had a close mic too.
Yeah.
Depend just to get the tone for the song, and that just seemed to always kind of be the right thing. It was like, yep, that's the guitar sound, and but also saying that we mixed the album from the guitar sound. And previous albums, it's always been a traditional way of, of mixing from a drum kit.
Yeah.
Build the drum kit up, make that sound good. Add the bass, add the guitars, add the vocals, add the keyboards, or whatever it is. But I just find by doing it that way, you kind of have to, by the time you get to the guitars, which is what is driving the album,
Yeah.
you end up having to kind of carve away half of the frequencies of the guitar tone you got to fit into what you've already
To
mixed.
make sure we're
So
max.
yeah, so we started with the guitar sound. We said, man, that's a banging guitar sound. That's exactly what I want. Now let's add the other instruments in and rather make those instruments work to the driving force, which is the guitar on the album, which was a big difference for me.
It's a really interesting way to do it, man. I mean, like you say, normally any sort of, I play bass myself, and any time I've gone and recorded stuff and all that, it's always been that foundation layer. First, get like you say, get your drum sounds on, get your bass on, and build it up. But
Build it
obviously,
up, yeah.
all your records being, guitar-driven records, it makes total sense to, start with that and have that being, the like you say, the driving force, the singing moment on it, man.
Big time. And it's the same for me. Like Lee, it would be like if you were like Victor Wooten or something and you were doing like a bass record of stuff, it would make sense to me that you kind of mix the bass guitar first because that's the driving force of the song. Get that banging tone wise, just banging. And then everything else that's if it's drums or guitars or whatever the case is, that will rather compromise those instruments just to kind of complement that driving force. So I mean it seems like an obvious thing, but it wasn't obvious for the last 15 years of my life. And when we did it, I was like, wow, what a difference that makes. It really makes a massive difference.
Says a hell of a thing for Andy as well, because obviously Andy being your drummer, and am I right in saying he co-produced this record as
Yeah,
well?
he was, but the beauty is yes, he's been my drummer for the last 15 years. He's
Mm,
been on like all of my albums pretty much. But because he's got that producer hat on too, he when he's playing the drums and tracking the parts, he's got the drummer hat on, but when he's co-producer, he really understood my vision of what I wanted the album to be. So it wasn't an issue for him to kind of really focus in and or at least give it a go, like just getting the guitar sound right and then bringing everything else in to kind of fit with that. And yeah, chuffed with the end result, man.
oh man, it sounds like it's a phenomenal record, man. I've been living it with, like you say, the last couple of weeks since it's been released. It's a great record.
Thank you.
Obviously, obviously, title track itself is obviously moving on as well. What made you choose that song in particular to go right? That's special enough for me to make it the title track.
Well, I think the main kind of driving force of that was the first song written on the album,
Oh, okay.
in completion, and it kind of inspired the rest of the album because when I wrote the initial song and then got together with the boys and we kind of finished it off. I didn't really have a vision for the album, but
Mm,
because that song was so raw and real, it really inspired me to make an album, you know, even though there's different kind of feels and vibes on the album, but it's all under that same umbrella of real raw kind of what I want to do. Don't try and write for a radio station. Don't try and write for a particular purpose. Just try and write an album that if you weren't the artist, you would buy. That was really the thing. So because it was the first one written, it just seemed to make sense to kind of make it the title track, that kind of, because everything else was born from that tune, really, well, the inspiration at least.
No, nice one, man. I mean, like you say, it's not, for want of a better term, and I'll on my show, I'll just play what songs I like, as simple as that. And I know a lot of people
Yeah,
don't say.
thank you.
But
Great.
you know, on my view, you know, you've not got many sort of very classic kind of radio friendly lengthy songs. You know, you've got tracks all over the shop, like for example, Baby's Packing Heat, which is like over 8 minutes, On With Fire,
Yeah.
that's going on 7 minutes. And I think that always allows for freedom with it. And I've not really ever conformed to that. A song has to be 3-4 minutes to listen to. To me, it should be, if you're cutting stuff out that's important in the song, it dilutes the song, you know?
Well, you know, well, that's exactly it for me. And I mean, I remember, and I won't mention the particular radio station's name, but I remember like releasing a single on the last album, and they're like, we like the song, but the chorus needs to start within 15 seconds of the song. We need to hear it. And I was like, but why? I mean, are people's attention spans that pathetic that a chorus needs to happen within 15 seconds of a tune? I mean, so it's, it's that cookie cutter kind of formula and format that, that I have, on particular songs on previous albums. I've always said, all right, well, let's write a single for the album.
Yeah.
And guess what, Lee? That never is the single, and it's the most least listened to and least liked song on the album every single bloody time, because it's written from the wrong place, man. It's written to be a product, not a piece of art, right? It's not a feel piece of art. It's like you're writing to a formula, and I've kind of over that now and realized that, as long as my backside points south, I'm not that artist. I'm not going to be the commercial pop guy and, selling bazillions of records. It's not the music I'm making. It's not the music I want to make, and it's not music I'm good at making. That's the thing, or passionate about. So I think it was a liberating thing to go, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to make the album I want to make with the songs I want to, with my loves and stuff I love, and take that risk. And if I release the album and everyone goes, this is the worst album that's ever been recorded in the history of beast or man, I'll take it on the chin, right? I'll be like, all right, okay, I'm sorry. and that was like when we released the album, we got really good feedback. It was more relief than anything, because I kind of was, I didn't know what to expect, the reactions to be to such a stripped back, real, honest album.
Was that something you were genuinely concerned about then, to take that
direction? Like I was losing sleep over it, man. Like kept on was wondering, like, am I making a stupid decision here? Like, like one of those heart decisions without any brain involved, where you're going, well, I'm just going with my gut and my heart and all that sort of thing. And, I did, and I kind of pushed through. But then you're like, at the end of the day, it's like, oh, this might just be like a complete and utter flop. I don't know, but I suppose that's life. You got to kind of follow what you believe in and grit your teeth and hope for the best, at some point. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, speaking of your loves, I mean, the opening track, Red Velvet Suit, I mean, that's pure Stevie Ray Vaughan, man. From the moment they hit through, that was like, yeah, you got your influences on your heart there, mate.
And well, I mean, that song is a tribute to Stevie. It's a tribute song because he's been such a big influence in my musical life and such a game changer for me since I was a kid. And I've written songs about everything under the sun, social commentary, personal things in my life. And I thought to myself before this album, I've never written a song about someone who was that important in my life, and that was Stevie. He was such an important figure in my life, and still is to this day. And I thought, you idiot, why haven't you written a song about that? That's what being a songwriter is about expressing stuff that's important to you and that you believe in. And that's where Red Velvet Suit kind of came from.
Nice one, man. Are there any songs on the album that you were talking about the album as a whole with the vibe of it, sort of being a little nervous in terms of how people would take it, going away from the sort of live stripped down? But are there any songs on the album particularly that you were really looking forward to hearing people's reaction on, where you thought you would go maybe a little left field or what have you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were, I think, two of the more country-esque tunes, which is the title track, "Moving On." I mean, that's, it didn't necessarily come from a country place, but it, ended up being this very simple, old school kind of country thing. And also, "Welcome In," track 9 on the album, is also very much that Nashville country
Very
thing,
much,
but not in a modern sense. In the country, I kind of like the real deal thing. And that was a big departure um, from whatever I've done before. That thing. But I just thought, they came out so naturally, they play naturally, they play live so naturally. Like, let's just go from it. So that was a bit of a, I suppose, like, intense moments of going, wow, am I going to lose more fans than I'm going to gain on this? And then, the other songs, which is really where my heart's at, like songs like "Baby's Packing Heat," which is just a stock standard 12-bar blues,
yeah.
right? And that's really my love. I love that kind of stuff. That's my roots. And I also thought, well, maybe doing stuff like that for 8 minutes on an album might be intense for some people, that aren't massive blues fans, or more maybe rock fans, song kind of driven fans. But yeah, there was a bunch of those moments where I was like, are you making the right choice? And then I kind of just decided, I was like, just go for it, man. Just like, if you're happy with the performance that we did in the studio, then pop it on the record, get it mixed, get it mastered, and get it out there. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you just finished the South African dates of those, the tour in support of the release. And from what I've seen online, it looks like those shows have gone down absolutely phenomenal, man. How have you found people's reaction to the new material live? Continue, a little, maybe a little concerned that on their opinion with it being new material.
For me, it's, and I'm sure every artist will always say this, doesn't matter how well or bad the shows went, because it's a new release. They always go, oh, fantastic. But really, for me, it's, the live set seems to be, for me, the best live set we've had in years. It really is, because those songs are so natural and so honest to me.
Yeah.
They just perform so naturally live. There's never a point where I'm looking at the set list on the floor and going, oh, not that one. Like, let's just get through that one to get to, just to get it over and done with. And I think that, because there's none of those feelings for us on stage, or at least for me, I feel the audience really, really takes into it. And I hopefully think, I hope the audience can feel that this is just such an honest version of me. This is kind of how I would ideally want to be remembered if I die tomorrow, type of thing. As this is the sound. So it's been fantastic. It really has, and obviously cannot wait to, bring it back to the UK, and in the following weeks, and perform it, and see what UK audiences kind of react to it. Yeah.
Yeah, nice one. I mean, like you say, you're coming over to the UK Friday as we speak. First day being in Manchester on the 5th. And then you're taking in all the way through, you're going through the Cleanie in Newcastle, which is a great venue, Glasgow, Cardiff, Wolverhampton, Brighton. So are you changing up? Of course, you're doing Nell's Jazz Blues Festival as well, I think, and playing Southampton as well. So how have you found, is the set, I'm assuming the set's moving on heavy. Is that what we're focusing on when you come to the UK? Is it a good
Yeah.
mixture? What, yeah.
So I mean, don't get me wrong, we've got some back catalog songs in that are staples in
Yeah.
the set. But, because the album is so natural, in the past when we release an album, I find like maybe 4, 5 top songs of the album are actually performable live and sound decent live.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot more room for back catalog, because you can only perform certain amount of songs because they've been produced, out of the eyeballs, right? Like it's just undoable as a trio, right? Like we tour, but it's crazy. All 10 songs in this album are are brilliant. They perform brilliantly live and go down great live. So it's we got other problems now of which songs do we leave off the album. So at this point, we bringing in the set, we bring 9 of the brand new songs from Moving On, and then adding in some back catalog songs kind of interspersed in between that. And it just seems to be a really fun, balanced, powerful, really heartfelt set. So really chuffed with how it's working.
That's fantastic, man. It's good to hear that, because to me, and I can understand why some artists do it, like you say, depending on how the album is produced. But when I've seen bands and they bring out an album that, I think's absolutely slamming, and you go see them live and they play like 2 songs off it, you're like, well,
Yeah,
that's kind of what I've come here for, you know. And I'm not going to mention
exactly.
the bands because it's unfair, but we've all
Yes,
been to
sure.
gigs. We've all been to gigs when that's happened.
Well,
And
I mean, the honest truth is it's probably been a couple of my gigs in the past on previous albums, because you really want to get more songs from the album on, but like you get into the rehearsal room and you start playing them as a trio and you go, no, that doesn't translate at all. We're missing this, we're missing that, we're missing a
yeah.
million things. And that was my whole point, Yeah.
Right. Well, then I can see exactly why you've done this album, where you've done it. You can, showcase the material you're so proud of to be. I
Yeah.
noticed on tour dates for the UK though, you with rather than having as one support throughout the whole tour, you've got several kind of local acts supporting throughout the tour,
Yes.
which I think is a great thing. But was that important for you?
For me, it is, man. It's it's obviously great. In the past, I've had kind of constant support for the whole tour, like one band or one artist supporting
Hmm.
for the whole tour, and that's great. But I think it's so cool to get local support for local shows. If we're playing in Cardiff, you get bands in that area
Hmm.
that they would be interested in doing it, and it's for me it's great to meet different musicians, from different walks of life, to hear different bands every night, different if it's a full band or a solo artist or whatever the case is. It's really really important, and I remember I'm speaking like I'm Joe Bonamassa now, like I'm playing the Royal Albert Hall, but I remember when I was younger, just trying to get onto a gig as
Yeah.
a support slot, and it was just like it seemed impossible, right? And I just think it's important to give great talent a stage to play on. If it's a stage for 50 people or 10,000 people, it doesn't matter, right? It's like you just want to kind of keep it going and keep I suppose, live music culture, alive, and people interested, and kids interested in playing music. It's a very important thing for me.
No, I'm with you on that, man. Like, as we were talking off before I hit record about my own festival that I set up, and I got invited because of the radio show and because of that to be on the judging panel for like a local battle of the band scene
Yeah,
in the town. And I went and judged that, and there was a band that won it, and they were so good at it. They're like, I don't know how they are, 17, 18, maybe something like that. And they were so good that I've just offered them the opening slot for the festival, because it's like if you can't support, this my
yeah,
festival's different, as you know, it's all for the local hospice and stuff like that. So
sure,
it's all supporting their community. But I just see these kids and they were like, "Are you sure you want us on there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we've got a wicked
definitely.
venue with the Apex, it's 800 capacity venue. We sell it out. We're really lucky with the support we get." I just
Yeah,
stood there and watched them and I thought, you guys deserve a step up. You deserve it. I mean, we all play the clubs and the clubs are all good fun. But when you were sitting there looking at it, I thought, I'm going to give these guys a slot. I just really enjoyed them. They were really good,
yeah,
really kind of sort of 90 indies kind of thing, but they were great. And it's nice when you go to a live show and from the opening act, so if you've got 3, your opening, main support, and then main, if it's slamming all the way through, then that's what you want. You don't, we all hear about stories where the headline act tampers with the sound, or the lighting guy doesn't really give the guys what they need and all the rest of it, and that just kind of ruins everyone's evening overall, because you're stood in the audience thinking, well, I can't hear the support act, but if it's
and
slamming all the
you
way through, that's what you
and
want.
and you're annoyed. That's the point. It's like, like I realized very very soon, like even here in South Africa, like the better quality support act you get, if they're really good,
Hmm.
they sound great, they look great. Or I mean, when I say look great, with the lights and all that, it just creates a great evening for the audience, and the audience is really what counts at the end of the day. But I also feel, which is just an incredible thing, the better your support act is, if you, and it's happened to me often, where I'm sitting in the wings of the stage, kind of listening to the support act, and they are absolutely burning. like, and you kind of like sit back and go like, damn it, we're gonna have to like up our game a little bit. Like, I mean, these guys are like on freaking fire. That is so good for you, man. It's so good. And you know, 9 times out of 10, when you get on stage after a burning act, you play out of your socks. You do. You really play so much better because you have to. And
Yeah,
now, why wouldn't you want that kind of push? You know what I
absolutely.
mean? Like behind you going, hey, hey, don't get too comfortable here. You know, there's these young kids here that are just destroying it. They're changing lives in the audience. You know what I mean? And for me, that is it's just a fantastic thing. And you know, to be honest, I haven't ever heard 90% of the supports we have in the UK ever live before.
Nice.
But you know, I've heard what the management have pitched and stuff, and it sounds really good. So yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's going to be fantastic.
That sounds great, mate. Just as a music fan, getting to listen to, you know, like half a dozen amazing local supporters has got to be fantastic.
Yeah, big time. Exactly.
Absolutely. Man. Well, like I see, you're coming over to the UK. I will be at the London show, so I'll see you down there, buddy. Uh,
Wonderful.
you've got the album obviously supporting out, but what does the rest of the year hold out for you other than, you know, supporting the release of this of Moving On?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, we've been kind of touring, moving on since, you know, beginning of March now, going into April into the UK, ending in Hungary. We'll continue the tour of the album in mainland Europe, like August, September. But between then, we're going to be doing like a unplugged acoustic tour in South
Oh,
Africa
nice.
because we're going into winter now. You guys are going into summer, obviously. We're going into the winter, so going into smaller, more intimate venues. And I haven't done that for years, man. I haven't done the acoustic unplugged thing, and it's really a different focus, right, to the full electric thing. So looking forward to that. So we're going to spend like July, beginning of August on the road here in South Africa doing the unplugged thing with the band, and then heading back to Europe and mainland Europe, like Netherlands, Germany, and all those kind of places on the moving on electric side again for the rest of the year. So it's all looking great.
Oh, nice one, man. With the strip back shows, are you looking at rearranging anything at all, or are you just looking at stripping back to?
I think we're gonna have to rearrange certain things. Like I think in an acoustic show, the guitar solo becomes less important, or not even less important. It becomes way harder to do, right? On these thick, like stubborn strings with no overdrive and loud amplifiers. You know. So I mean, there'll be obviously a lot of guitar playing, but you
Yeah.
know, you gotta shift a lot of focus in the songs, and that I think in turn involves a lot of rearrangement and rethinking the song. So there'll be a lot of the moving on songs
No,
that, because they were written, most of them on an acoustic guitar, I know will translate in a fantastic way in
it's
a
wicked,
kind of
man.
stripped down unplugged thing. Yeah.
Oh, nice one. Well, Dan, thanks for your time, man. It's been great to speak to you, dude. I'll see you at the
Lee, thank you.
London show, dude. And so at the beginning of the interview, because you mentioned it, and it's one of my favorites, I'm going to play "Baby's Packing Heat" at the beginning of the interview on the radio. But
Thank
what
you.
song from the album would you like us to play at the end of the interview?
Oh, maybe maybe play Who I Am, like the single. Yeah.
Nice one. All right, man. Well, like that. Well, thanks for your time, Dan, and I'll see you in London, dude.
Lee, champion. Thank you so much, brother.
No problem at all. Thanks, man.
Have a good evening, man. Cheers, buddy.
Bye, Dan.